Adia
and Daio. Like, I don't know why.
Honestly, that's just the vibe.
I don't know.
Honestly,
we've done enough of these now. I don't know, dude.
Yeah,
whatever.
at this point,
I'm here. We here. What's up?
All here. You're a part of it.
Gang.
Honestly, as you can tell, vibes are immaculate, and it's because we're about to talk about something that's a little hard to talk about.
Something that's less immaculate.
Yes.
And that is xenophobia in the Western world. Specifically when it comes to people who are members of the Asian diaspora.
Yeah.
Oof. As a disclaimer, I feel like we should say we're going to talk specifically about the xenophobia and the history of xenophobia and racism within the United States, because that's where we are, that's what we know, and when we are viewing all of this Asian media, that's the lens that we are looking at it through. So that's why that's where we're coming from. And also, we do try to hit as many Asian countries as we can when we're doing our historical talk. We fully understand that Asia is not a monolith. We understand that there is a plethora of countries, of cultures, of languages, of religions, but because we only got like 45 minutes to an hour with you, we finna, knock that shit down, condensed. So we're only gonna do a little bit.
Yeah.
But if there's something that you want to hear us talk about, shoot us a message, send us an email, DM us on our socials. It's in the link in our bio. And we'll chat because we love talking. We don't shut up. You know this.
Yes. You've been here long enough. Not going to be touching deeply on like Western influence in those countries, because that's a whole other
that's a different
monster that has caused a lot of pain and obviously has a lot to do with how expectations and understanding of peoples have like grown. We're mostly going to be speaking obviously about stuff going on American soil with the immigration and introduction into Asian cultures that has now bled into how they are viewed today and how their culture and art and media are viewed.
So, as a Western fan, as someone who is from the United States, I think there are certain cultural norms and behaviors for how we interact with American artists that we do put on to the idols, K-pop idols who we stand or we like or we interact with. And I think depending on where you're coming from culturally in the United States especially, that sometimes we don't realize that the way that we are interacting with these idols can hold some xenophobic or microaggressive behavior, because we don't even know that they're microaggressive. We don't even, and as a Black person, we experience that often where sometimes people genuinely are like, oh my God, I really like your hair. Can I touch it? Like they really do like it. And they're not trying to be rude or mean, and they don't understand that that's hella uncomfortable because I'm not a dog and you can't pet me. But like, to unpack why you feel like you have that ownership of people, or why you can invade someone's personal space, why your personal space doesn't hold value, there's a historical reason for that. And so that's what we want to get into and what we want to chat about. And yeah.
And it's unfortunate because there's obviously already a lot of microaggressive behaviors when it comes to especially American reaction to idols, and including like even how you view them in a genderfied way, over infantilization, like all of these elements that actually have a deep historical context that has actually found its way going abroad with even those understandings.
For sure. And I don't want people to hear the word, oh my God, microaggressive, oh my God, racism, and immediately kind of like shut down and be like, oh, I'm gonna skip this. I mean, if you do, you do, whatever, like you're wrong, I guess, maybe, hopefully. Cause I curse a lot, so hopefully you are wrong, but
get with it, bitch.
You know. but because I feel like there is so much space for, as a community, because we always talk about K-pop as a community, like there is space for learning, and I think if it's coming from someone who has the knowledge and someone with good intentions who is genuinely just trying to share information with you. We're not saying change your whole vocabulary. If you think you should after reading this, then maybe you probably should after, but we'll just see where you stand on what your thoughts are, what your inner conversation is with yourself when we're talking about this. Because I will say, when we were doing research for this episode specifically, there were a lot of things that I learned. And it's not like I thought of myself as like a Asian American history professor. I knew history. I had a decent amount of Asian American friends, but this was like way more of a deep dive than I knew. And we don't teach this in school most times, unless this is your major or your minor or something. Unless you take this class, you're not going to know this kind of stuff. So that's why we felt like it was important to share.
The awareness itself is the first step to true connection and actually seeing people. I think we love these idols, we love this media, and we consume it. We love the people in our lives who happen to come from these cultures as well, and a lot of the times we are not truly understanding the historical connotations of the things that we do. And it's just as important as Black people, as we would want other people to do for us, that we understand it for others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like, there's so much history that we can't go into absolutely everything. There's I feel like after doing this research, there's definitely a whole nother episode or a whole nother podcast in theory that can be done about the relations between Asian Americans and African Americans. So stay tuned for that. But for right now, we're going to start with the very beginning, and that is 1521. So Portugal lands in the Philippines, and as any good European country does, they finna colonize. So they pop up in there, and their colonial rule begins in 1565. And by 1587, they bring the first Filipino people to the land that is now known as the United States.
Yeah, in Cali.
Yeah, yes.
Which I will say that was probably one of the most surprising things to learn, that the first, like, people of clear Asian descent that landed here to be here were Filipinos.
Yeah, because I feel like in American schools, we're definitely taught that, like, the first time Asian people are really mentioned is, like, the California Gold Rush.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, and then gold, and then Chinese people came.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, okay. That makes sense. You know, I don't know. And it's the same way with Black history, because I think, like, the only reason I know a lot of the Black history that I know is because my parents taught me. It was not because I learned it in school. So shout out to our teachers who are teaching history. Thank y'all. After that, time passes. You know, they're kind of, it's giving indentured servitude. It's not giving 100% free will. So 1790, Congress passes the Naturalization Act, which grants the U.S. citizenship to all free white persons. This includes Asian people for like a smidge. And then they say, oop, roll back the minutes.
They said, oops. We didn't mean that.
We messed up. And so one of the people who kind of like stood out to me when doing this research was a woman named Afong Moy. I'm probably saying that wrong. Might be Moy, I don't know.
Moy.
And what's interesting is they don't even know if that's her real name, because her owner gave her that name.
Yeah.
So she was purchased by a white man from China, and she visited the U.S. and was exhibited in New York as like a attraction. She was kind of put up in this guy's house around a whole bunch of like fine china and other like Chinese artifacts, and she would wear a traditional Chinese dress. And they basically treated her like a freak show. She also had her feet bound, so foot binding. We don't have enough time to get into that, but you can look it up. It is fascinating, and back then it was definitely a belief that like the smaller your foot is, the more dainty, and because you couldn't do physical labor with that small foot, that meant that you were of a high stature, that you were well off, that you were doing well. So how she got into a position where she needed to be sold, I don't fully understand. It was not the norm to show your bound foot to a man you were unmarried to, or people who were not like close quarter family. So making her display that was degrading and not how you treat a person.
No.
And then he abandoned her in New Jersey.
Yeah, he kept passing her off to people, which was like gross.
So I don't understand the full history behind it, because this happens more than once in these stories,
Yeah.
right? Where the white guy who purchases is like, actually, do you want my couch? Like, that's the energy that they're giving, which is super disgusting. Right. She was displayed in this guy's house, and then he sells her, and she becomes part of like the P.T. Barnum. If you're familiar with P.T. Barnum, he ran circuses. He was known for having a lot of different acts. He was like the premier dude for freak shows for different artists. He also owned Joyce Heth, who was coined or shown as the oldest slave or some oldest black woman in the world or something, which they ended up finding out was a lie.
It was a giant lie.
Because she was like 112 or 120, some bullshit. They lie like a fucking rug. P.T. Barnum, trash, garbage, we got beef.
Sorry. The Greatest Showman has some good music, but it's lies, y'all.
Afeng Moy, they just ran her through. But for a lot of white people in America on the East Coast, that was their first interaction with an Asian person. For at least the beginning, she did not speak English, so she was seen as very docile, very agreeable, but she was probably scared shitless. And so that kind of is, I would say, probably the beginning of this formation of how we look at Asian women as being pretty like, I'll go with the flow, I'm very small, and the
conservative, docile way of seeing them, and that entire like fetishization really started to skyrocket deeply. And that's what's sadder is that she was not the only person to have that happen. Because in 1843 there was another situation where, and that one really threw me for a loop, I ain't gonna lie, because that was like again a situation where was the actual choice? There was a Japanese citizen who, I'm pretty sure his last name is Manjiro, correct? And he became the first Japanese individual to land in the U.S. in 1848, and it was because of like a castaway situation, and not a fun one. Like
not Wilson,
a castaway situation where there was a group of Japanese citizens. They had been on a boat. It ended up going way farther than they wanted to. They needed to be rescued badly, and a big ship passed by. It was able to rescue them, and they were like, "Wait, y'all are white people."
Pretty much.
Like, what happened?
And like, shit's huge. Y'all are white.
What's going on? Wow, crazy. And so they were like, well, and at that point, Japan had definitely started to like, there had been a blockade a little bit of leaving the country. So most Japanese citizens were not going to other places to immigrate.
They were not allowed to travel or immigrate.
And so they were dropping them back home. And one of the men was like, that boy,
he seems smart.
Yeah, he seems smart. I want him. Because, you can own people.
And he was like, I saved y'all. So you owe me.
And
then they were person?
Like, maybe? And so then he owned a 15-year-old boy and took him.
Who doesn't speak. Like, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, why are y'all trying to own people? Okay, obviously, why are y'all trying to own people? But also, like, owning people you cannot communicate with. Like, what is the goal? Well, because they don't care about consent. I'm trying to reason with crazy people.
It was about subjugating people, and if they couldn't understand you, it was easier. They took him, he went on the ship, he went back to modern-day California. This will come up a lot. Get used to California.
The West Coast.
It is the West Coast. It is the... It's not the Sunshine State, is it? That's Florida.
I don't know.
It's Cali. He ended up spending a very, very long time in California.
Yeah, so what happened was he got off the boat, and his new ship captain owner was like, okay, man, let's come to my house. I'm going to take you back, little Japanese boy. And so they go to his house, and his house is boarded up. And he's like, oh, what happened? And they're like, oh, yeah, dog, by the way, your wife died. And he's like, oh, what do you mean? So there was no one, like, taking care of his property. So they just boarded that shit up. They were like, you're done. So he was like, oh my God. So now he's mourning the loss of his wife. He also has this teenage Japanese boy he's got to take care of. I don't feel bad for him. I'm just explaining the story. Mind you, this is not empathy that you're witnessing. So then he goes to his neighbor and he's like, dog, do me a solid. Watch this little Japanese boy. Let me stay here. And his neighbor's like, okay, whatever, dog. Like, I feel bad for you, honestly. That's crazy. Your wife died alone. So you left her at sea for years. So they let them stay there. They kind of get their bearings. And he's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go. He hears about the California gold rush. He's like, guess I'll stake out a claim. By this point, he was very smart. So by this point, he's kind of like learned English. He's kind of found his way around American culture at the time, which is, still Wild West, but he's starting to assimilate. So he goes to California gold rush area, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna pan. And he pans for gold, and he ends up making $600, which is a decent amount back then.
Yeah.
Okay, so he gets enough for him to go back to Japan. So, and it's interesting because, like you said in the beginning, he tries to act like they gave the boy a choice, like, hey, you want to come to America with me? And he's like, sure, white man. I don't think that's what happened, because if that's the case, you're not panhandling for hours on end in the California heat to make enough money to go. I mean, maybe you are, I don't know, but so he finally gets to go back home. At this point, like 50, 60 years has passed.
Yes.
His mother is still alive.
The irony.
The best part of the story, his mom is still alive. He finally gets to see his mom. I mean, he did have to go through a lot of like interrogation by the Japanese powers at the time, because they were like, where have you been? Twin, where have you been?
America. And it was not giving. So he is happy to be back home with his mother after 50 years. And the irony of him being able to come back to a home. Anyway.
But the cool part is he also brought home a really detailed map, because travel for Japanese people was restricted. They didn't have as advanced maps as the Western world did have, because they were doing all that conquering. So when he came, because he spoke English, he was able to transpose the maps for his leaders. And that was kind of great, because he was seen as like
a topographer of ways.
That, and like a good Samaritan, good citizen.
Yes.
He was given property, he was given money, and he was like set off like, hell yeah, dog, you rocked. You did well for your country, which honor in Japan is a huge deal. So it's great that he was able to come back home and be received with open arms, which a lot of the people in these stories that we're going to talk about don't receive.
Yeah.
So that's great. 1800s, California gold rush happens.
Yeah.
Okay, back up. So basically, some dude is vibing in California. There's water, and he's like, ooh, that's shiny, I like it. Touches it, picks it up. Oh my god, it's gold. The news explodes. And in China at the time, not going great everywhere. China, big fucking country. Let's be so for real. And at this point, also owning a lot of other places too. Yeah. So a lot of people we're talking about. California Gold Rush happens, also known as Gold Mountain. And because China has a lot of poor areas during this time, they hear of the news of someone finding gold and striking it big, and there's a mountain of gold in California. You just have to go and get it. It sounds dope. So everybody's like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go. And what's happening too, it's kind of like serfdom in a way, like when you see in European history serfdom, so that they owed their landowners money, so they were being heavily taxed, and they were in great debt. So if you got to go to a country that had a pile of gold, you could pay off your family's debt and like restore their honor, and it was just kind of like the go-to move. Like, that's a great move. Why wouldn't you?
It looked great on paper. I understood completely.
And in the beginning, the gold was kind of easy to get to. So there's like two types. I don't know. I'm not a geologist. So
I wouldn't have known.
Girl, thank you. But so there's two types of gold basically that they ended up finding. Yeah. So in the top level was just like the cute gold.
Yeah.
That's what I'm calling it. The baby gold. The little gold, the easy gold. Easy girl. And she was just at the top in the water, like what the guy picked up basically. And then there was a second layer of gold that was you sifting through rocks, you sifting through water, you getting really into the earth to pull that ish up. Yeah. And so with the first wave of the gold rush, a lot of people did actually find success. They did end up finding gold. But once that was fully picked through, because you also have to consider how long it takes to travel from China to the US.
Yeah.
In the 1800s. right? It's a boat, babe. It's not a plane. It's not a flight. It's not a red-eye, mama. Like, this is a boat trip.
And it's a choppy boat.
Like, there's mice, you know? There's mice on that boat, okay?
It's not it.
It's not it. It's not it. There's no showers on the boat. Okay, this is not your Carnival cruise.
It's a boat. It's not fun.
Once they finally got there, a lot of people found that they weren't able to have the success that they were expecting, and they were kind of shit out of luck.
Yeah.
And in order for them to even start working in gold mining area, they had to get materials, they had to get clothes, they had to get tools. So you're already out of some money too, because you paid to travel and you need to buy all this stuff. So a lot of that stuff they ended up getting like on credit. So then they're in more debt in a new country.
Yeah.
So it was a really tough process that they were going through, to be thrown into a new country and to think like hopes and dreams. It's the American Dream saga for everyone who comes here voluntarily.
Yeah, voluntarily being the operative word. But
it
it really is interesting because the U.S. did grant them the availability to come and pretty much to do labor because they needed more workers, and because China had pretty much also, similarly to Japan, barred immigration itself, which actually has the adverse effect with job creation. Big little tidbit for everyone who might be thinking what they might be thinking, but you actually very much do need immigrant based labor a lot of the time. So ultimately it ends up doing the adverse effect. So you had this influx of people who came here only to find that the actual amount of gold that you could get was maybe not as grand as you would hope. Yeah. And so you have all these men, because and we'll get to that.
Women weren't coming. Yeah.
They weren't coming. But they had to find other means of how to kind of create community and make a trade somehow.
Yeah, so then you see the creation of benevolent societies. As a Black American reading this, I found benevolent societies really interesting because people were able to kind of create community based on their nationality and their last name. And that is something that is so key to being able to keep your culture. With slavery, obviously, with the Atlantic slave trade, people were taken all over the place. Families were split up, and being bought and sold as kids, especially, made it so you don't know a ton about your ancestry. You don't know a ton of your native language because you were a kid anyway. So it's hard to even now. Like, I know there are so many African American customs that people held on to because they were just like, my great grandma always did this because she said this is what her great grandma did. And this is like just being passed down by that way, but not having the full history. So for them to be able to come and have a community that isn't home, but felt like home, that would help you get a job, that would help you get food, that would give you room and board, because they know you're in debt and they see themselves in you and they want to help you. That is something that it gives, I think, hope.
Yeah.
That Black Americans even today don't have. Because even as a community, like if we could figure out how to do something like a benevolent society as a community today, it would still be so hard because it's like we just don't know. We don't even know where to start.
Well,
you know?
We did, and they burned it down. So
you ain't never lied. You ain't never lied.
And that's going to also, not to spoil alert, but ultimately, like, they created their own communities and spaces and started to network with each other in the best way, and ultimately actually started to do really well, outperforming and and having more success than their counterparts at the time. Yeah. And so there started to be a large rise of, sometimes people get a little angry when people who don't look like you start to do really well.
They hate to see a bad bitch win.
They do. And so ultimately what ended up happening was a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment started to grow, like, loud.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we see this a little bit further when we see Japanese immigrants coming in as well. These cultures were known for rice farming. So they were really good with irrigation and redirecting water systems. And that was a key feature in what was needed to mine this gold.
Yeah.
And on top of this, even if they only made like a couple dollars, less than they actually need, it's still more than they would have been able to make if they were in China at the time. So they were feeling like, okay, I'm still getting a step closer. And they worked more as groups, because they usually worked with a group from their benevolent society. So they worked with their families, they worked with their friends. They also said that when new boats would come in, they would go to the dock and kind of like yell out in their native tongue and be like, hey, is anybody from this family here?
Yeah.
Or anybody from this town here? And if you recognize that, you're immediately like, oh my God, I have, okay, like I would be all right. After a couple months journey, that has to be a relief.
But yeah, then came, of course, like the anger. And so that stigmatizing ideal of the Chinese community keeping to themselves and choosing not to be a part of the California way started to arise, which, like, what?
They were angry because they didn't blend in.
Hold up, y'all. We gotta save some of this for next week. So feel free to follow us on some of our socials. All the info can be found in the description below if you're on YouTube, or in our bio on Spotify or any other podcast listening platform. Feel free to tune in next week where we continue on our conversation regarding xenophobia in the Western world. Bye.